everybody, welcome back to Auto Scholar with Mr. B. I'm Mr. B, and today we have our E30 in the shop, and we're getting a lot of modifications done to it, to the air conditioning system. So a couple weeks ago, my compressor clutch broke, and it caused my AC system not to function. Now, it is July, and I'm in the southern United States. Our temperatures are above 100 degrees on the regular, so interior temperatures, we see 140, 150 degrees on a car like this. So AC isn't really even a nicety, it's a safety item at this point where I live. So I wanted to put a more reliable AC system on the car, and I ran into a company called AC Solutions, which provides AC solutions for older vehicles. And they make a Sanden compressor kit for our E30s. So whether you have an M3, whether you have a 4-cylinder, whether you have an inline 6 like I do, newer, older, whatever, they make a kit that's going to fit your car, and it's all inclusive, which means it pretty much replaces everything outside the evaporator, which, you know, with this car being 32 years old, really no AC part is going to be reliable anymore. All the hoses and everything are going to start developing leaks, and it's just going to be a thing where we just have to throw refrigerant in it every year to keep it going. I didn't want to do that. So we're going to put the Sanden compressor on. The Sanden compressor is going to replace the regular compressor on here. It's a much more economic and reliable compressor, and it's more efficient. So you get kind of a trifecta there of benefits going to this compressor. Plus the compressor, if you ever have to replace it, it's $150, $200 versus the $1,900 quote I got from BMW on my compressor. So I can literally replace the entire AC system with the Sanden kit for less than what it takes just to replace the compressor with a BMW compressor. So let's go ahead and get started. This is a pretty involved process, and it does take some special equipment, just to give y'all a heads up going in, but I don't think it's anything outside of my viewers' ability. So let's get started. Okay, so first thing we are going to do is we are going to go ahead and pull the system down, remove all the refrigerant, and I know you probably don't have an AC machine at your disposal like I do. However, you can go take this to a shop and you can get them to pull your car down for next to nothing. And also, one difference you may see in this vehicle versus the one that you have is the fact that it is a 134A system from the factory. So there is no retrofit here, but pretty much the parts go on the same way. Also, unless you have a convertible, your battery is probably not right here. So we have some AC lines that run along where the battery is. And so we are going to need to remove the battery. If your battery is mounted right here, you need to go ahead and remove the battery. Just take some 10 millimeters, remove the negative first, and then we have a 10 millimeter down here, which holds the battery in. So we're going to go ahead and get the battery out of the way, and then we're going to move on to the next step. Okay, so the next step, what we're going to do is we have to take this bracket out right here. This is where the hood slides into this bracket. This is what secures the hood towards the back of the engine compartment. So we have two 10 millimeter bolts here, but what you need to do first, don't just go in there and loosen this up. We need to mark this. So I do all my marking on things like this with a just a Expo dry erase marker, and it stays on the metal, but you can wash it off very easily with just a shot of brake cleaner or carburetor cleaner. So these are 10 millimeters. You want to put this back exactly where it comes from, because it does affect the way your hood lines up. And if this is off, your hood's going to sit too high or too low, and it may cause an issue with wind noise or even closing at all. Okay, so for the next part of this, we have our low side line, our low pressure line here. It's on the bottom. It's the bigger around line. Okay, this is going to go directly to the compressor. And then we have our high pressure side. Okay, and this is going to go directly to the receiver driver condenser. So right here, this is a 24 on the small side and a 27. If you don't have wrenches these big, you can use like a crescent wrench or something, but just be very careful. If it feels like it's slipping or something like that, then you need to make sure that you use a better wrench here. And so this will come off fairly easy. All right. And then there is, if you follow this line down, you'll see a bracket I'd have to zoom the camera out for you to see, but there's a 10 millimeter holding this bracket on to this little rubber loop here. You want to loosen that, and then you should be able just to gently pull this out. Now there is a green O-ring back here. Your color might be different if you have an R12 system. You're going to want to keep that O-ring on there because you're going to match this up with another O-ring when you go back to it. Now for the high side line, we have, for the small part of this, we have a 17 and a 19 millimeter. We're going to take this off as well. And same thing, you're going to have a O-ring here as well. I'm just going to leave this like it is. You're going to want to replace that O-ring as well. And so you're going to get those two off, and then we'll remove them from their respective positions after here. Okay, next up, we have to get this washer tank out of the way. So you have a little plastic turn piece right here. It's like a little screw. It does have a slot in it in case you need to put a screwdriver or a coin in there. We'll just lay this off to the side. Now you don't have to disconnect anything. All we're going to do is just slide this out of the way. So you just lift up, and you're just going to slide this out of the way, and that is going to facilitate us taking out the receiver dryer. So for our receiver dryer here, I normally put, when I'm loosening these lines, I'll put a wrench right here, and this is a 19, and these are 19s as well. And so you'll want to hold this right here and break these loose. This one's going to go that way towards the engine, and this is going to go away from the engine. And you will have a pressure sensor right here. Now, depending on what model of vehicle you have will be going to pretty much let you know what type of sensor you're going to need. And they do sell sensors that match whatever kit you get. If you have an older vehicle, you may need a new sensor. If you have a newer one, you can either modify this one to fit, or they sell sensors that are direct fit. So we're going to take these off, okay? And I've already pre-loosened these because I'm doing this one-handed and I can't do all this with one hand. And so you will have O-rings on each of these, and just like the other fitting, we're going to keep those. Then you'll have two 10 millimeters right here. Now you can take the sensor off of this while it's in the car, or you can use it. You can take that off when it's on the bench. It's up to you. And so this will just slide out. And the new one will be capped and packed in nitrogen. So you do not want to uncap this, the new one, until you're ready to put it in, because what this has is a desiccant pod in it, and it will absorb moisture into it, which will then get into your AC system. So we are going to do an evacuation on this and a vacuum on this to get any remaining moisture out, especially like where I live, it's very humid. So you don't want that moisture in the system. The moisture can combine with refrigerant oil and create an acidic environment inside of your AC system. And that will, of course, reduce the life of your AC system and maybe present leaks. So once you get out of that way, we will move to the next step. Okay, so compressor hoses here. We have two. We have our high side and our low side, and yours may look completely different than this, and that's okay. These are kind of rare, the ones that I have. So on these, there's a 32 millimeter fitting right here that you will have to undo, or they screw into adapters that screw into the top of the compressor with these hex nuts here. And so you're either going to have to figure out a way to get a 32 in there to turn that, which most people don't own a 32 wrench, or you can literally just take a hex or an Allen key and remove. There's one on each side, and this is very hard to see. Just want to get the camera to focus here. There's one right there. And you have that on both sides. Now, some of the older models, the compressor is going to be different than this. So however you have it, we're going to need to disconnect this. If for some reason you can't get these disconnected, you can, this big line right here that we disconnected the first time, you can kind of work this line out with it connected to the compressor. On the small line here, it really needs to come off. Now, I'll tell you this, if you are not planning to reuse these hoses and you can't get these off any other way, you can just cut through the rubber. So use just like a razor blade or wire cutters or something. You can cut through that rubber and drop it down. Or there's a possibility as well, you can remove the compressor and drop it down enough to where you can get a wrench on this. But this is probably one of the more aggravating parts of this job. And you're just gonna have to get creative to figure out how to get this done. So you also have an electrical connector here that will have to come undone. Mine is a 3-pin, yours might be just a 2-pin. Whichever, you just need to disconnect it, let it dangle. And once you get that done, we will be on the bottom side of the car to remove the compressor from the bracket with all the belts and all that jazz. All right, so the next thing that we have to do here is take off our power steering belt. Now my power steering pump may look different from yours because this is the self-leveling suspension, but you have a lock nut that you have to loosen up right here. And this is your adjuster. It goes across some teeth, and then you have to loosen up these 2 bolts here. And then you rotate that adjuster and it will loosen this, the belt will come off. The only reason we have to take the belt off here is because we have to access the belt to the AC compressor, which you will get a new belt in your kit. So, you know, to make things easier, if you just want to cut this belt off, mine is worn out anyway. So that's probably what I'm going to do. And then we'll get down to taking the compressor off the side of the engine. So the next thing we have here is the bolts holding the compressor bracket onto the plate that mounts to the engine. These are 13s, and this is a long bolt that goes pretty much all the way through this assembly, and then there's a nut on the back, and there is one up higher too. You can just barely see it on the other side there. And so we're going to take those out, and then the compressor should just come out in your hand. If you didn't take your lines off, just be careful to guide them out as you're dropping the compressor. And then once we get that done, we will move on to the next step. Okay, so we go ahead and pull the compressor out. And right now, just as a side note, is a really good time to replace your seal for your oil cooler if you have one. It's right here, it's right wide out in the open. And it looks like mine's leaking, so I'm gonna do that before I put this other compressor on. I've got one. So now's a really good time to do that because very little obstruction here. So, okay, so the next step is going to be getting at the condenser here. We have a new condenser and new condenser lines that are going to this AC system, and there is only really one good way to take it out. You can actually remove the radiator and go through the back end. It's just a lot of work, and I know it seems like a lot of work to take off the front of these vehicles, but this is really the better way to do this. So depending on what front end you have is going to depend on the situation. This is an MTech 2 kit on a late model or facelift body style. If you have the diving boards and stuff like this, this is going to be way more easier than this. And I've had this front end off like 3 or 4 times since I've owned the car, and it's kind of a pain in the butt every time you do it. So I'm going to go ahead, and you also need to take out the kidney grills and the headlight grills. They have the clips up top and your Phillips head screws, black Phillips head screws along the bottom here. We'll get those out. We'll get the bumper out. We'll get the MTech kit off. And then just don't forget, you're gonna have to unplug your blinkers and your fog lights and all that jazz when we go in here to get this stuff done. You may have an underbelly pan on this car that you're working on. That has to come off as well. And once we get all this off, you will see a big metal front of this car. And I'm gonna catch up with you back then because that's pretty much the same on everyone's car. So this is just gonna be a little bit different compared to whatever car you have, but this is the best way to do it. Okay, so we got the bumper and the lower part of the MTech kit off. And so now what we are going to do is we have to get this piece off right here. So we have a bolt here. We have a bolt here. There's a Torx screw right here that goes right underneath the kidney grill. We have a bolt here, maybe an extension for that one. And that's going to be on both sides. And then, of course, don't forget to unplug your fog lights. And depending on the model or whatnot, you may have more. Just look around. You know, don't go to yanking. This should just slide right off fairly easy. Just be careful not to scratch your fenders or anything when you're doing this. You know, you may have to kind of like push this out a little bit to get this to come out. And so once you get that done, you'll expose the condenser and the fan. That way we can go ahead and start unbolting this and preparing the area for the new parts. Okay, so this is what you'll have when you get that panel off. And so what we are after right here is these connections. Right here, we are going to take these connections off. I've got mine soaking with some penetrating oil because they look a little gnarly. And this is not how yours should look. This was just an emergency situation I had where my original fan went out. I just threw this Advanced Auto Parts Special on here to keep the cooling. With the spa fan that we have on the new condenser, this should really not have any issue with the cooling. So you'll notice how this condenser is what they call a serpentine condenser. So it's just a pipe that kind of lays itself over. And the new condenser that we're putting in is much more efficient than this, and it is going to really help with the vent temperatures. So what we're going to do first is I'm going to let the car down. I'm going to show you what we have to take off up top, and we're going to try to do this without having to pull the radiator or anything. Okay, so now we're back underneath the hood. We have our radiator support right here, this little bracket, and you have two 10 millimeters right here. Once you get that undone, this will come out. And then you will have two 10 millimeters right here, and this is what holds the condenser in. So we'll have to take those off, and we can go ahead and remove the lines and everything underneath to get the condenser out. Okay, so next up, we have to take off the condenser lines here. And I put some penetrating oil on mine because these are stuck. These are stuck bad. My car is a little rusty, so may have to get some line wrenches here. Yeah, that seems pretty married on there. It's a 22 millimeter right here. Let's see if we can get this bottom one off first. Okay, so let's see if we can get this off. These are very rusty. I've let them sit for a while, but might end up having to cut these off. It's just, yeah. Yep, they're gonna round off. So what I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna take something and cut these off. Again, we're replacing these lines, so it's no harm, no foul. I'm not gonna plan to use any of this stuff again. So let me get these cut and then we'll take the condenser out. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I am going to cut the lines off of here because they're just not coming off. It's just 32 years of this being together. So I've got this cutoff wheel right here. You can use a hacksaw, you can use a sawzall, but I know y'all have seen the videos of these things coming apart and hitting people in the face and getting stuck in their cheeks and stuff. And if you're here for that kind of video, I'm sorry. I wear full face protection whenever I'm using one of those. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna cut on the condenser side through right here and through right here. And what this is gonna do is it's gonna leave me, if I do have to use this line sometime in the future, I can. I just got to put it in a bench, work this with some heat and get it out. but the new kit comes with these lines, so if you have to cut them, it's not really that big of a deal. Okay, so we'll just move these lines out of the way, and now we can kind of work this condenser out. Depending on if you have an oil cooler or not, you don't want to rub up against the radiator and damage it at all, but here we go. Okay, so we got the condenser out of the way and we are ready now for the next step. So if you're following along in the instructions by AC Solutions, it's going to go ahead and tell you to go ahead and lower the car down and remove the interior lines if you order the interior lines, and replace those and the expansion block. So what I'm going to do is I'm going straight into the reassembly of the car, because to me it's just a better workflow. If you have your car on jack stands and everything and you're doing this, you would have to take your car off of jack stands or off of a rack and go ahead and do the interior part. Plus, a lot of you did not get the interior lines. If you didn't get the interior lines, then that's not going to mean anything to you. So what we're going to do is I'm going to go ahead and put the compressor on, and then we'll put the condenser on, run the lines, go ahead and do the wiring. And then after that, we're going to do the AC lines on the inside of the car. So we're reversing a little bit of workflow here from what AC Solutions is telling you. And if you want to follow them to the T, then you can just kind of fast forward and then rewind and do it exactly how they want you to do it. But I don't see any difference in doing this, whether you put the parts on or now or later. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so I went ahead and got the bracket out of the box, and you have a little bag of hardware here, and the long bolt goes here, and the one that's just a little bit shorter than that goes up here. So one of the biggest problems with putting a sanding compressor on is it's a little bit bigger than the stock compressor. So now if you do not have this oil cooler on the front of your car, there's no need to worry about this at all, but most people have that. So you have these oil lines that are coming from the filter housing, and I don't have this tight yet, but this is rubbing on this line right here. So I can get it to focus. There we go. And this oil line right here is nothing to be played with, okay? It has basically all of your oil pressure inside this going to this cooler and back. So abrasion is not going to be a good way for this compressor housing and everything to fit in here. So, you know, I've read up on this, and people say, you bend the lines or whatever. So I'm going to kind of noodle this out, and I'll return with my solution. Okay, so what I was able to do was I went ahead and bolted this up just for a test fit, and I was able to get these lines to move a little bit. I just loosened up this hose right here, and I kind of pivoted this that way, and that gave me, I got about 3/4 of an inch right here. So we'll see how the compressor looks when it sits in here. You don't want really a whole lot of rubbing here. This is a high kind of vibration area. So I'm going to go ahead and torque these down to spec. I believe that's 20 foot-pounds right here on that. And we'll go ahead and bolt the compressor up, and I'll tell you how to do that here in a minute. We'll see where we're at. Okay, so with the compressor installed, what you're going to do is you're going to put the bolts that came in this pack, you're going to put them this way, so kind of pointing out here after we bolt this up. And the orientation will be, you have on the back, you have the small line on the hole on the right here, and you have the big one on the left. So what I did is I went ahead and just put this in. You have 4 of these bolts and nuts, and then when it goes up on the slide piece here, where this goes for tightening, and so I just tightened them up a little bit to where it just hold the tension of the belt. Went ahead and put their belt on, and then I used a pry bar and I pried right here, and I got the correct tension and then tightened up the bolts the rest of the way. These bolts torque down to 30 foot-pounds according to the AC Solutions. So now we're going to go ahead and put the power steering belt back on, tighten up the power steering belt, just a reverse order of operations there. And I'll show you the wiring here on how we wire up this compressor. Okay, so for this next step, we're going to need a couple of tools here. We're going to need some wire strippers, cutters, something like that to strip the wire on the new compressor and the old compressor wiring harness. And you're going to need some type of crimpers here for the crimp we have to make, and a lighter or a heat gun for your heat shrink. And so you will have two things in your little kit. You have a piece of heat shrink right here, and you'll have a butt connector. So this is what we're going to use to connect the factory wiring up to the Sanden compressor. Now let me, you also may need some type of wiring diagram to your car just to make sure that you have the correct color wire. But these wires are just one wire compressors. They also ground to the engine block. So we just need the one power wire going to the compressor clutch. And that's what we're going to do now. Okay, so here is the wiring harness. I just cut it off of the old compressor. I did leave enough room in case I want to ever put it back on. But for the most part, I'm not going to do that. So your connector down here is what we're needing to look at. So this black wire coming off on mine's a 92 again, yours might be different, is the wire that I'm gonna need to splice into the clutch. The black wire coming off the compressor from the compressor clutch is going to just butt connect directly in there. Now, before you butt connect it, you definitely need to make sure that you put on the heat shrink. Don't do it afterwards because you're not gonna be able to get it on. So put the heat shrink on first. You're gonna strip the wire off that black wire, the insulation off, then the insulation off of the compressor. So this has got some kind of a weird terminal on it. Just cut it off at the end here. Strip out, you know, about 1/4 to 1/3 of an inch of insulation. Go ahead and butt connect it, and then you're going to slide that heat shrink up there. Make sure it's covering the entire butt connector. Take your lighter or your heat gun and melt it, and make sure that it's a watertight fit there and no water can get in there. Again, your results may vary as far as wire color, but for the most part, this is one of the easier parts of the job. Okay, so here is the wiring here. I just went ahead and just depinned the other two wires that were here that we're not needing. Those actually went to a pressure sensor or a temperature sensor, I'm not quite sure, on the compressor. And then just went ahead and just plugged this back into the factory harness. And so I'm gonna make sure that this wiring doesn't get caught anywhere. So we'll probably just zip tie it to the AC lines when we get in, when we put those in here. So now we just go onto the condenser. And so I went ahead and slid the condenser in and went ahead and tightened up my 10mm bolts here. Let me go ahead and lift up the car to camera level, and I'll show you what we're doing with the condenser. Okay, so condenser is in. Now the condenser sits on these two little rubber pads here, and mine were in good shape, but if yours were not, you may want to source some of those. And so this is a different condenser design than what came off of here. You know, we had the serpentine condenser. This is the waterfall or condenser that we have on here now. So got this in here, got the two 10mm bolts up there. You have two hose connections here that we took off. Well, actually I ended up having to cut mine off, but this one right here is going to go to the receiver dryer. And this one right here is going to go to the compressor. Now, what I'm gonna have to do real quick is lower this back down. There's a bracket underneath here. I'm gonna have to take this off because I can't push this out and run it. But I figured I'd go ahead and show you all this. We can also go ahead and put the cooling fan on. So they give you a little bag here that has the 4 bolts for the cooling fan if you decided to get the cooling fan in the package. And this cooling fan can go on, really only needs to go on one way. So you have your tabs here. You just want to kind of locate these foldovers, speed nuts here, in the center of the hole. And so this can go on the wrong way. But you want to make sure that these holes are lining up and that the wiring is pointed towards where your fan wiring is. Now my fan wiring on the other fan that I had was going to be on the right side in the car sitting, if you're sitting in the car on the right side. So this bolts on. Hang on, let me grab a screwdriver. So yeah, you can get the screwdriver here, it makes it a little easier. To get them started. It's a little tight to get your finger in here. You don't want to force it, you don't want to bend anything. This last one's being difficult. There we go. There we go. Yeah, just keep them all loose until you get them all tightened up to the correct torque. They have lock nuts on them, so the vibration and everything's not going to loosen this up. Trying to keep my big head out of the way here. So this should fit nicely behind the bumper and kidney grills and all that. And the wiring that I have is just to a 4-pin relay. So black is going to black, and your power is actually the blue wire, okay? Now when we go to test this fan out, we want to make sure that it's blowing the right way and everything, that the airflow is coming in here. Real easy to test that is get a paper towel and just hold it in front of the car. You should pull the paper towel into the grill. And that way, if it's blowing it out, you know you have your fan wired up maybe backwards. So just make sure that you test that, because if the fan is blowing this way when you're driving, then you're actually reducing airflow across from this, and you can overheat very, very quickly, and it can get very, very hot. So I'm gonna go ahead and put this on. Now we have this line here. This goes to our evaporator. Excuse me, it goes to our receiver dryer. And so we need to match this up. So give me a second and I'll do that. So underneath the hood, we have this 10mm right here that holds this bracket on, and this is the line that goes to the compressor. This is your high side line. And so we're going to take this off because we can't move this line with this bracket on there. And it's a 10mm and it comes right off. You're going to need to save the bracket because we're going to put that bracket back on the new line when we run it in. Okay, so on the condenser lines here, what we're going to need to do is, I put these on just finger tight right now. I'm going to pull this through here. You may have to tangle a little bit with the electrical connections. You can either pull this out through the front, or you can push this out through the back. We are going to go ahead and take this clamp off so we can put it on the new hose. Don't forget your little plastic spacer here. We're just going to put this off to the side right now. And so definitely match up your hoses. You can get this one backwards, so just be careful that it matches up with the same curvature as the one you're taking off. So with this, it already has an O-ring on it. The other one did not. I had to just match one up. And so again, you want to put a light coat of refrigerant oil on here. And so whenever I'm putting these hoses, if I have an end that's exposed, I just leave the cap on it. So I'm just going to put it back where it came from, here, in that general area. Flip this over like that. And again, we're just hand tightening these right now, leaving a little looseness because we may have to kind of twist this line a little bit to get it to line up with the back of the compressor. So once we get everything else hooked up, we are going to tighten everything down all at once. That way we know it's in the right place. So if this needs to pivot or anything like this, this will be loose to be able to pivot. Okay, now we are under the car, and I'm going to go ahead and hook up the high side line, which is the smaller line, the one that we just put on the condenser here. Now we have these little plugs on the back of the compressor. Just take some pliers, get it started. Just so all the oil doesn't leak out in shipping. You'll hear that hiss there, that's the nitrogen in these compressors. Make sure that the rubber cap in there is still in here and not stuck on there. Now we've got to wrangle this on. I went underneath the oil lines. If you have oil lines, it's going to be kind of a pain. So we're going to put that, make sure it's centered up. And then again, we're putting this on with our hands, trying not to get in the way of the camera. You need to make sure that it's going on straight. Here we go. Again, be very careful. You do not want to cross thread this. Cross thread it. It's a good way to get it to leak. So what I do is I just kind of shake this a little bit to get it started. Get on there a couple turns. And we're going to come back and tighten this up. But again, until I get everything tight, we still have to put our clamp on up top. So let's go ahead and do that. So here's that line coming off the condenser, and I'm going to show you something. See, this line actually isn't in the right place. It needs to be over a little bit, okay? So because I didn't tighten everything up, I can pivot this over, clamp it down with my 10 millimeter like it was before. So it'll be right here. The line there, see, I can move it because it's not tight, it's just finger tight. And I'll clamp this down, and then I'll tighten up the condenser side and the compressor side, and we'll be done with this line. Okay, next we are going to go ahead and prep our receiver dryer here. And so depending on what model you have is going to depend on what pressure switch you use. This right here should be compatible with the new one. So I just took this off, 17 millimeter wrench, take this off. There is an O-ring here, and the O-ring actually just keeps dirt and stuff out. It doesn't really seal it in because you have a Schrader valve here that keeps this in. Now, you do not want to take the caps off until you get this in the car and you're ready to bolt up, because this has nitrogen in it and that keeps everything dry. So we're going to go ahead and carry this over to the car. Remember our 10 millimeter bolts here. And then we have these O-rings, and these were taped to the part itself. And so we're going to put those on, lube those up, and the line coming from the condenser that we put in is going to bolt here, and the other line going to the inside of the car that goes to the evaporator is going to bolt here. So let's go ahead and get that done. Okay, so a couple of tips on installing this. First of all, this metal line right here that runs all the way right here, you need to take this off and you need to flush it out. The reason why we are reusing this line, so you can take some AC flush, or if you're in a pinch, brake cleaner, make sure that you spray some compressed air through it or whatever and get any residue out of this line. This is one of the few parts that we're reusing here. So I got this here. Now, I do not bolt this up first, okay? What I'm wanting to do is I'm going to get those O-rings that came taped to the side of this right here in this little bag. You're going to lube those up, the two of the small ones. You're going to put one on this line right here and one on this hose right here. Now, this is the hose that we put on to the condenser. Once you get those finger tight on here to where they're on there, you're going to position this and bolt it up. Okay, this is going to keep anything from getting cross-threaded. If you bolt this up, this is not going to move and you can't position it correctly to get everything in straight. So that's just a tip here. So what we're going to do is we're going to replace the O-rings, lube them up, and then go ahead and finger tight this together. And then we can go on to this other hose that we're going to replace here that goes down to the low side of the compressor. Okay, so I went ahead and tightened these up, and I went ahead and plugged in my sensor. Don't forget to do that. And then went ahead and tightened these up here. These are 19s. You need to take a 19 to hold the top of this to keep it still, just like we did when we untightened everything. And went ahead and bolted down my 2 10s. So we're pretty much done with this area. And I went ahead and tightened this up because I'm gonna go ahead and push the washer bottle back over so I can get to this hose right here. Okay, so this is the next line that we are putting in. And like I said, I just got things finger tight right here. This line's gonna go right there. And remember, we did take a bracket off, and we'll have to put that back on. So when we do the bracket, after we do the bracket, we can tighten everything back up. This line right here is a little funny because it's not like the line that came off. The end goes in the back of the compressor. And so this line has to kind of run parallel to the high side line. So you have to route it a little weird. It looks like it would go like just straight down here, but you have to actually come out here and route it underneath the oil lines. And then you got to kind of twist that hose just a little bit to get it to line up correctly to the back of the compressor. And so when you're first dealing with this, it doesn't really look like the hose is going to fit. However, it does. And just don't forget to put your O-rings on, re-grease, get both of these sides finger tight, put your bracket on, and then you can tighten it up. And then after that, we are going to go and tighten up the condenser, the back of the compressor, get all this tight, and then we will be working on the interior where we do the hoses for the evaporator and the expansion block for the evaporator. Okay, so as I was putting this line in and getting everything squared away, I found a little issue with the kit. Very minor, not that big of a deal, but this clamp right here that holds this line on, the diameter of the AC Solutions line is too big for you to reuse this clamp. So it will not clamp shut enough for you to bolt it on. Not that big of a deal. I think I have some more of these laying around somewhere that maybe have a bigger diameter, but something that you need to probably look into. If I find a solution or anything, I'll put it in the description of the video. But as of now, I'm just going to move on. It's not crazy, but it's something that I really would like to put back. So I'm just going to keep moving, and if I figure out something, I'll let you know. Okay, so now that everything is in place on both ends, we're going to go ahead and tighten these up. Just remember to support it from the condenser side as well when you tighten it. You just want to snug it up, go about maybe a quarter turn. You do not want to go too tight because you will pinch that O-ring in there or flatten it out, and it could be a leak spot at one point. We are also going to go underneath the compressor here and tighten up those 2 lines there. Just double check all your connections. And now we're going to go inside. Okay, so now we were inside the car, and we are on the passenger side. And so I have taken off this kick panel right here. It's just one screw that goes in there, Phillips head screw. You may have to kind of manipulate this a little bit and just slide this out. I have also, on the glove box here, you have these straps that hang down, and they have these little plastic pins in them, like so. And you can just kind of push those out with your fingers, or a little flathead screwdriver can pop those out. And then we're just going to drop this down, and you have this plastic cover that is right here. And so you have two screws. There's one here and one there. And you have a plastic turn clip that goes right here, and you just turn it 90 degrees and it'll pop out. And so what we're after here is we're after this area. And so we have to get this panel off right here. And let's see if I can show y'all where the clip is. Okay, it looks like the clip might be missing in this one. Let's see. Okay, so this plate comes off. There is a little turn screw right here. It's just a 90-degree turn screw. And then there's one down here that goes back up there. You can see it there. Unscrew that. And then, of course, you have this right here that screws up towards the top of the dash. Once you get that off, you are going to see this piece right here, which is your floor vent. And it'll have a T20 Torx screw right here that you'll take out. And what I'm using for these, because that one actually wasn't that bad, but we're gonna have to take this plastic piece off right here. And it is a little bit more difficult. So what I've been using here is this flexible 1/4 inch with a T20 on it. Just be careful. This piece right here is very fragile, and they're pretty expensive. Everything interior plastic wise on this car is expensive, so just take your time, think it through. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna take off this plate, and I'm gonna show you guys where the screws are. It's just easier see, I can't shove my big camera in there to get the pictures, but they are in some pretty odd places. But behind this is going to be your expansion valve and the connections to these lines right here that we have to replace. So the one thing about this piece right here, you see we have bolt holes. We have 4 different screws that go through here, the little T20 Torx. And on the back end, you see there's a little rope gasket, and this part goes to the top. So when you're in the floorboard of the car, you're looking at it like this. These bolts right here, not too difficult to take out. This one right here, that one's a beast. So I used a swivel and an extension to get that. It's just a feel. You really won't be able to see this. You'll just have to stick your hand back there. There's not much room. And it's just, you're going to struggle with this. But once you get it out, make sure that this seal is in there, because again, this part of the system is getting condensation in it, and you don't want that seal to be missing. If the seal is missing, you may be able to kind of seal this with some silicone or something like that, just to keep the water from dripping out of here onto your floorboard. Okay, so now we got this piece loose, and once I get this piece completely off, I'm going to show you where the mystery screw is back there that was giving me such a problem. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take these lines right here. You have 2 lines. You're going to have to take the front one off first, probably. And you may have this like this styrofoam wad of stuff right here. You need to pull that off and get it out of your way. But this is the expansion block right here, the piece that we're changing. And you can only get to it by pushing this down a little bit, which after you unbolt it, it will reveal itself. And so what you're going to need to do is get either a 1 inch or a 25 millimeter, and you're going to need to brace this, okay, for when you're taking this off. So you need to hold this still while you're removing the top lines. If you do not do this, you can break or twist the end of the evaporator and cause an issue. You do not want to do that because you're going to have to pull the dash and replace your evaporator, or it's even worse, you can cause a leak that you don't see, and then you're going to charge this thing up and it's going to last a couple days or less, and it's going to go back hot. So we need to make sure that we are bracing this with our wrench before we turn these two lines off. And the lines are 17s, and again, 25 or a 1-inch size open-end wrench will hold that. Pliers will do in a pinch, but the wrench is kind of nice, especially get you one with some length on it so you can have some leverage when you're holding that. So I'm going to take these two lines off, and then we are going to pull this out through the firewall. Now these aren't connected on the other side. Remember I told you not to tighten up these yet because we're going to pull these out. There'll be a rubber piece in there I'll show you that'll probably come out with the lines, and then I'll show you. Okay, so I got the lines off. One thing too, these lines are going to have oil in it, and I have the tracer dye oil in this system, and so you're going to need to get a rag or something to put these lines on, because if not, they're going to drip this stuff all over your floor mats or carpet. And also when you're in here, be careful putting your hands in this and then touching anything else, because this oil, I promise you, will not come out of upholstery or carpet. So now we are coming up here to where this pokes through the firewall, and we are just going to pull this out, and there'll be a rubber, like an oval with two holes in it that'll be in there, and you'll just yank this out. Once you yank this out, you will also, you have these two connections right here to the bottom of the expansion block. Again, just hold the expansion block as you're loosening those. And so you're going to want to turn, like, towards the car, towards the front of the car to loosen those. And once you get this off, make sure that you have your O-rings and everything back on the evaporator before you bolt in the new one. And then we're going to put the hoses on, but there's something we have to do to the hoses first. Just on the low side hose, which is your bigger hose right here, we'll have to put some insulation tape on it that should have came in your kit. So, and we do that so condensation does not drip inside the car, just like BMW did when they built this back in 1992. And then we'll put some right here to keep everything in here. And of course, we'll put everything back together. Okay, so here are our lines, and this is the rubber plug that we pulled out of the firewall. We're gonna have to remove the lines and be able to put them back in. I'll show you that in a minute, but we're gonna go ahead and just take these part numbers off here. This is the low side line. The low side line's bigger. Remember, the low side expands, so it has to be bigger. This is our tape. We used to call this dum-dum tape back in the day. What you're gonna do is, see, just like BMW did, we're gonna cover this all the way up to the end with this tape. And we do this because this line will condensate. The high side line is going to be hot. It's going to be hotter than your interior temperature, so there's not gonna be any condensation there. But this is gonna be colder. So just like the can of soda that you're drinking out of in a hot room, you're gonna get that liquid on the outside. Well, we don't want that liquid or that water vapor that forms and condensates into water on here to drip on our carpet or cause any mildew issues or anything like that. So what we're gonna do is we're going to mimic how BMW wraps theirs on this. And once you get done with that, this stuff right here is pretty easy to use. You just tear it. It's almost like electrical tape, but it's real thick. Tar paper tape. And we're gonna cover all this up. I'm gonna show you what it looks like when we're done. Okay, so one thing you need to be careful with, I went ahead and wrapped this. Just make sure that all the metal all the way up to the hose is wrapped. You don't wanna see any metal. If you do, go ahead and just kind of cover this up. Make sure there's no air bubbles. Make sure all your seams, when you're doing the hose, the insulation around here are tight. So you don't want any water pooling up inside this and then coming out. They give you just enough to do this hose. And I thought I had a little bit more. When you get down to it, it's not gonna come off the roll. So you have like a whole circle around here you're not gonna be able to really use. So just be careful when you're putting this on not to run out. If you happen to need more, any auto parts store really sells this stuff. Just ask for dum-dum tape or AC insulation tape, and probably ask the oldest guy in the auto parts store because he'll know exactly what it is. So let's go ahead, and I'm going to pull this out. This is, again, that plug that goes on the inside of the car. We're going to pull this out, and when we get the hoses out of here, we're going to place this back in the car. And again, this part goes towards the front of the car. And then I'm going to take some oil, I'm going to lubricate in here, because when I'm pushing this through, I don't want to push this all the way through the firewall. You want to make sure this is secure, because this is not only a wind noise problem if this goes all the way through, but you can also leak water into the inside from rain. So we need to make sure this is secured and it is in the right place. Okay, so went ahead and put this rubber piece back in. Remember that the big hole goes on the bottom. Little hole right here goes on the top. And I greased it up with just some oil that I have. And so we're going to slide the lines through. You need to make sure that this piece is in all the way and it's in good. And then when you finish putting the lines through, it's in all the way and it's good. Again, this is a water area. It kind of pulls up with water here. And you don't want water getting inside the car and running underneath the carpet and cause some rust issues and of course some smells, things like that. So make sure you get that right. Lube these up, and then we're going to slide the lines in. Again, the low side, the one that we put all the tape on, goes on the bottom, and the high side, the one that is not taped, goes on top. Okay, so we have both the lines pushed through up here. Don't forget your O-rings. There's one that goes in between these lines here. And I just finger tight. Remember, we just want to finger tight everything. And then once we get the other side in, we will hand tighten everything with a wrench. But under here, so let's walk under here. So my two lines are right there. Now what you're going to want to do is you're going to go back with this plastic piece. Let's see here. This plastic piece, and you're going to put this over the expansion block before you put the lines on. Do not forget that, because these lines are a pain in the butt to put on. And if you forget that plastic piece before you start screwing that in, you're going to be upset at yourself. Ask me how I know. But we all make mistakes, right? So these lines right here, the big line is kind of the difficult one to put in because it's kind of stiff. You're going to really want to just start these with your, my focus here, with your fingers, and do not put a wrench on it until you get about halfway in. That will make sure that you don't cross thread this. You don't want to cross thread this right now. And remember, when you tighten these up to, again, support the expansion block, you don't want to break any of this stuff in here. Be very careful. You know, you're kind of at a very fragile point in this AC system right here. So once we get that done, we're going to put this plastic piece back on, and we'll be able to reassemble, tighten everything up. And then after that, we're going to leak check everything before we put the whole car back together, because if we have a leak and we have to take everything back apart, that is going to waste a lot of time and cause some issues. Okay, so after you get the lines tightened up in there, and again, you just want to snug them up. You don't want to put any crazy pressure on it, because that's an aluminum expansion block and you can strip it out fairly easily. We're going to come down to the other side, again, making sure that you have lubricated O-rings on each of these, tighten these up, and then we get to do the fun part. This is after you check all your connections. And I just went through and double checked everything that we just did, just to make sure that we had everything tightened up. At this point, you're going to need a vacuum pump. And so I have my Robinair machine here that you probably do not have. So we have a couple of choices here. You can put the car back together with the system in the state that it's in, and take this to a professional shop and get it evacuated and recharged. Or you can get your own vacuum pump and do it in the driveway, and then get a set of gauges with refrigerant and fill the system up that way. But right now, if you still have the car apart and you have a vacuum leak, and you see I did a vacuum for 30 minutes, and the leak test did pass on the machine, which does not mean it's leak free. It just means it passed on the machine. But while I have the car apart and I have access to all the points I need to tighten up, I can do that without putting the car back apart. But I think this is pretty good. I'm gonna go ahead and put the car back together, and then we will go through the charging on it and see what we get. Okay, so we performed the vacuum on this for the hour that AC Solutions requests for when we're doing the evacuation on this. And we also did a leak check on the system, and it is leak-free according to the machine. Some leaks may show under pressure versus vacuum, so we don't truly know it's leak-free, but I feel well enough to where we can go ahead and charge this up. So I messaged AC Solutions, which great company. They get back to me with questions that I have like within the hour. They have a thing on the website, you can ask them questions. And I was asking about the charging weight. Okay, so in their directions it says to charge to 1.95 pounds, which is about how my car says 900 grams plus or minus 50 grams. And because my car is weird, it's a 92, which was the first and last year of the 134A on the E30s. This kit is pretty much designed to also be used on R12 cars to convert them over to 134A. So that's kind of how the instructions are written, and 99% of these cars are R12. So I checked that. They say they agreed that you know, with the 900 grams plus or minus 50 or the 1.95 should be the charge weight on this car. So what we're going to do is we're going to charge up the car, which I've already done, and then we are going to do a performance check. Now I have a whole video on performance check, but I'm just going to run through it really quick here. What you want to do is you want to crank the vehicle up while the vehicle's charged. You want to have your gauges and everything on the vehicle so we can check the pressures, and you want to have a temperature gauge thermometer inside of the vent closest to the evaporator, which should be the center right vent in the car. You're going to have the blower motor on the single speed. You're going to have the AC set to recirculate as well. And then you're going to have some type of airflow over the condenser. So you can use a box fan or something like that, or you can actually drive the vehicle as well. That's actually going to give you your best performance. So the performance that we're looking for is somewhere close to 100% efficiency on this vehicle. So how do we measure efficiency? Well, if it's 100 degrees outside, which here in the southeast of the United States, it almost is 100 degrees outside, I want to see that the ambient temperature versus the vent temperature be about half, okay? So 100 degrees, I want to see 50 degrees of cold air coming out of that vent. Now you do have a couple of variables, the biggest one being humidity. So very humid down here down south. So I'm not expecting like 50 degrees or a 50% drop in ambient versus vent temperature because of the humidity. And what the humidity does is it attracts water to your evaporator. The water drips off of the evaporator and leaves the puddle underneath your car, but that's also taking the cooling effect from the evaporator. So that's how humidity can affect the way that the air conditioning system works. So anywhere close to half of the ambient temperature should be your target goal for this performance check. And if you have that, the system's working as it should, and you should be good to go. So let me go ahead and do a performance check, and let me see what kind of vent temperatures versus ambient temperatures I'm getting with this AC Solutions systems. Okay, it's a little loud in here, but I want to go ahead and show you guys. Here's my high side pressure right here, about 175. Here is my low side. It looks like we're about 60. That's fine. With the temperature outside, it's about 90 degrees right now in the shop. I do have my barrel fan in front, and I have my hood closed as much as I can with the lines here. And so let's look and see what we're doing on the inside here. Let's pick up the RPM a little bit. We'll close the door. Roll up the windows. And so let me see if I can get this thing to focus. Looks like we're 58 or so, which with the humidity is probably okay. You know, it is very hot right now, so I think this will probably drop down when we drive and get some more airflow through that condenser. Condenser on these cars are very small, and with these, you know, especially with the wagon, with the amount of space that is in these wagons, it takes a little while for it to get down. Yeah, it's already starting to drop down with the RPM tipped in. So it looks like it's about 55. I would imagine driving this down the road, it would probably drop another 5 degrees or so. So it's cooling down in here. It's nice. I've only got it on the first setting, and I got the recirculate and the AC button on. But yeah, okay. It's starting to drop into, it'll probably go up a little bit now since I turned it up on high, but it dropped down to, looks like it's dropped down almost to 50 there for a split second. Pressures look good. So yeah, I would say this is a success. So I'm gonna go drive it, put some miles on it. Okay, so I just came off a very long test drive with our E30 Touring with the AC Solutions Sanden compressor swap. And let me tell you, I am very impressed with the output of the system. I did get the temperature down to right above 50 degrees at the vent. So, you know, it's over 90 degrees outside right now. And so that is well within the line with the humidity. It's very high humidity today. It's about 80%, 90% humidity out here today. So with that being said, I think this system is doing the best it can with the heat that my area is providing. You know, these systems weren't that great from the factory. Their heaters worked fantastic, but their AC systems, I've never really had just an ice cold E30 before. It could be because the evaporator is just a little bit smaller than on other cars, but either way, I think this is the best we're going to be able to get with this setup, and we came in a lot cheaper than if we would replace this with the factory BMW compressor and the compressor only. So basically we got the whole kit, which replaces everything outside of the evaporator, for less than what it costs for a compressor from BMW for this vehicle. Now, they do make E30s that have cheaper compressors than the one I have on this car. And if you want to go that route, that's fine. But if you want long-term durability with a parts replacement that's way cheaper than BMW offers, then the AC Solutions kit is the way to go. Now, with the good side is everything, again, everything's replaced, everything's new. This is just like it was in 1992, rolling off the assembly line. You know, there is some difficulty of putting these parts on. You have to be fairly advanced, or at least have enough time and tools available to do this install. You know, this would probably take me, if I wasn't filming and everything else, probably at least a whole day, if not maybe more, just depending on if you get into rust or corrosion where you're having to really have problems with the lines. This kit also comes in stages. You don't have to get the inside lines or anything else. You can just get the compressor and the bracket, and you can build your kit accordingly. I decided just to go full boat because it was what I was going to spend on a new compressor anyway, and I'm planning to keep this car for a long time. Fitment was fine, except for that one issue where we had where the clamp, the factory clamp, wouldn't fit around that low side line near the strut tower. I'm going to come up with a solution to that, and I'll post it in the description when I do. But overall, very pleased with the kit. Very, very pleased with AC Solutions with them coming back. I did have an issue with my order and shipping. It was damaged, and they sent replacement parts right away. That wasn't their fault. And I did have some questions about the refrigerant capacity, which were answered within an hour of me asking on their website. And that was like early in the morning. I don't even know where they're actually located at, but it was probably earlier than East Coast United States when I asked that question to them. So very, very happy with the company and their customer service. And they seem to be knowledgeable enthusiasts in this stuff. And I always like to support people that do what I do and like things I like. So if you like this video, please support me by liking the video, subscribing, leave me a comment in the comments and let me know what you think. If you've done this install before or you're planning to, let me know your plans. Also, I'm on Facebook, Instagram, VK, Twitter, under Auto Scholar with Mr. B or Master Tech Mr. B. You can look me up there. I post a lot of things there that I don't post on YouTube. And of course, also, I have a lot of E30 content on YouTube. And so there's bound to be something there that you will need one day. So subscribe to me. And if you have any questions, let me know. And we'll see you next time on Auto Scholar with Mr. B.